I want to now get into this idea of trauma-based mind control and how it may have been linked to some of the elements that you were able to extract from what was going on with Gate and how all of that links to the abduction phenomenon.
The ETs had to do with it. So whether they were part of the program or whether the people that were running the program knew that this alien connection was possible, if you could get to the other side, if you could pierce the veil, see beyond the veil, be able to get out of this state of awareness, be able to shift your state of consciousness, if that's all what it was. And if that was the dissociation, maybe the trauma was seeing the beings for the first time.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks.
Welcome back, everyone, to Higher Journeys. I am your host, Alexis Brooks. And hey, I hope you were here for part one of a riveting interview with my guest, who you see right in front of you, Desta Barnabe, who is the author of MK Ultra for Children, The Hunt for Psychic Abilities Through the GATE Program. I want to jump right in, Desta, because in part one, you really gave just a very thoughtful overview, not only of the GATE program, but a possible connection with MK Ultra. Could GATE have been and could it be a cover for something deeper? We're just going to leave it at that, deeper. But here's where I want to take it even deeper. And that is the very, very powerful and interesting link that you made between some of the things that you were able to discover or recall about GATE and the alien abduction phenomenon, the alien contact phenomenon. And there's a lot there. So we're going to take this deeper, guys. I will say that this is not meant for children. So if you do have children in the room, because we're going to get a little edgy here, a little edgier. And I don't know that it's appropriate for young people to be listening at this point, although we are going to be talking about some of the children that have been involved. So just want to give you a heads up on that. Desta, look, there's no question that there have been some ugly things that have happened in the course of our history, on the record and off. And you have found out that in your book, or you suspect that in your book, MK Ultra for Children, interesting title, that GATE may have been part of some of that ugly, nefarious stuff that was going on. I want to now get into this idea of trauma-based mind control and how it may have been linked to some of the elements that you were able to extract from what was going on with GATE and how all of that links to the abduction phenomenon. Let me just preface by saying that a lecture that I've given several times at this point, but initially in Australia back in 2019, in which I postulate that contact with non-human intelligence may be a far more ubiquitous phenomenon than is suspected. And when I went into sort of making my case for the evidence for that, one of the elements that I looked into was abuse, childhood abuse. I don't know if I should say that middle word on this venue, but you know what I'm talking about. Traumatic abuse that happened ritualistically to children, and those individuals having a propensity for not just anomalous experiences, but alien abduction encounters. And what I found was stunning. It's still very difficult to say what came first, the trauma or the propensity for these kinds of experiences. But you touch on this in your book. I want to dive right into that. What were you able to uncover, particularly with some of the work that David Jacob has done in his book, I think called The Threat? You were able to extract some interesting points, that there is a correlation here and how it all may tie back to some of the things that were going on with GATE.
Well, I think that the trauma-based mind control, unfortunately, is part of this. I'll mainly say that from the book, I did definitely quote Whitley Strieber and David Jacobs in their work, uncovering some of this as well with the alien abduction scenario. But also where I got a lot of it from is Dr. Colin Ross, who I quote extensively throughout the book, who was a psychiatrist who uncovered a lot of the, was the first person I think that wrote such a large study on the MK Ultra documents himself, and happens to be a world expert in dissociative identity disorder. So kind of linking those things, Dr. Colin Ross actually was someone else also who was linking alien abduction to and dissociative tendencies to trauma-based mind control, because he was a psychiatrist that dealt with a lot of people that were abused. I don't know how we're going to say that, but were abused in their childhood, and part of a lot of these programs, not necessarily the GATE program, but a lot of other, programs. I don't know how much we're going to, I don't know what I can say, what I can't say, but so he did a lot of this as well. So yes, he was also looking into some of these paranormal experiences and trying to see if trauma and some of these like SRA, let's say that, like maybe that's like easier to say, SRA,
Okay.
some of these abuses that some of these children were undergoing and had handlers, and one of the big links between all of them, between the GATE program, SRA, the trauma, abuse, mind control, and alien abductions, would be not just the amnesia. So everyone is forgetting, parts of their experience. Missing time, of course, is a big one with all of it, and this dissociation. So the dissociative ability, again, where we were talking before, dissociation kind of is just like having an out-of-body experience. So you feel like sometimes in a real out-of-body experience, you can see yourself, right? So you're floating on the ceiling, or you're floating somewhere and you can look back and see yourself. But in a dissociative state, it's kind of just where you've disconnected from your feelings and thoughts and memories, and you're kind of just in another state of awareness. Right? It's just like a different state of consciousness. So a lot of people who have alien abduction experiences also feel this kind of floaty, different state of awareness, where they're in a time with no time, a space, like that doesn't have any time, where they're in sometimes people are getting abducted in their rooms with their husband or wife sleeping right next to them, and they don't notice anything. And so the thought is that they're just put in a different state, a different plane, a different parallel reality, parallel existence, a state of awareness, however, there's a million ways to, we don't know exactly what it is. But I think that the link between all these things is that all these people are in some kind of dissociative state, missing time, and amnesia over the whole entire state. So whether it was trauma that induced these things in the first place, in our last interview in part 1, we were also talking about this memory that I have when I was a child of being like hysterical and not ever wanting to go back to school. I don't even like thinking about it or really talking about it. Of course, what my mom thought happened to me, because I wouldn't tell her what happened. I was just terrified and didn't ever want to go back to school again. Of course, what she was thinking is that I was abused, abused at school. And because I have absolutely no memories of this, I really don't go there. But even when I try, but I have throughout my whole life thought about this, why I was so scared. And because there's no even creepy memory of why I can't remember it, thank God. And maybe, and I do know how to do hypnosis. I'm a QHHT practitioner. So I do know how to get into that state and kind of pull these memories from me. And when I do it, and I think, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try and pull and see what actually happened, why I was so scared to go back to school. When I actually get into the place of where I'm about to do that, like self-hypnotize, I actually get so scared of what really happened, of actually reliving that experience, that I don't want to do it. And I come up with some kind of excuse of why I shouldn't be doing it today, and I'll just try it a different time. So I don't know if that's what it is. And I don't know if that's what the trauma was. So what Whitley Strieber kind of brought up, which I never thought about, is so the trauma could have been an abuse like that cracked, that was the actual trauma that cracked us open. That's the reason we can't remember. That's the reason that the dissociation came in. And what Whitley kind of brought up is maybe what happened is that I think what it is that the gateway process is supposed to take you out of your body. So just the dissociative ability that maybe those tones did, the binaural beats, maybe just took us out of our body. Maybe it was not as nefarious, but the dissociative ability came from just being pulled out of your body from that experience. But
Mhm.
what Whitley brought up is that maybe what it was that the ETs, whether they were working with this program or whether, because I
Mm.
was seeing lights in my room that were coming like from outside, these like Christmas kind of lights coming from outside into my room at the exact same time. I would always say it was like 5 or 6 or 7 years old. So it was around
Okay.
the
It's
exact same
happening around
time.
the same time.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I don't know which one happened first. So I don't know if those things came and I had that ability and I was chosen for the program because these things were happening in my house. I don't know if they did something in an abusive way that was the trauma that made me be able to see the other side and connect with these beings, or if it was I don't really know what it was. I don't know if the ETs have something to do with it. But sorry, so going back, what Whitley was saying is maybe the ETs had to do with it. So whether they were part of the program or whether the people that were running the program knew that this alien connection was possible if you could get to the other side, if you could
Mhm.
pierce the veil, see beyond the veil, be able to get out of this state of awareness, be able to shift your state of consciousness, if that's all what it was. And if that was the dissociation. So the trauma, so Whitley was kind of saying maybe the trauma was seeing the beings for the first time. Maybe
Mhm.
the trauma was getting out of my body and not just getting out, but actually having an interaction with the beings at that point. Because later in my life, I did have a few interactions with beings and it was the same being. So I never thought of that. So that's a different way. So, I mean, there's a lot of threads that go between all these kind of things, but that's a
Mhm.
couple examples. But what I think the real parts of it are, the real things that link them together, is the amnesia, the missing time, and the dissociation.
Right. You say we talked about this in our first interview, where you say you really don't have a lot of childhood memories. Period. Not relative to gate or outside of it. So I don't know if this question you'll be able to answer, but can you recall any possible contact with NHI, with non-human intelligence, prior to you going into the gate program?
So I have a lot of hypnagogic
Mm.
experiences that I've had my whole life. They also started when I was about 5 or 6.
Mhm.
So these lights coming into my room, I don't remember being that scared of them, but the hypnagogic stuff that I had, especially when I was a kid, it was mostly spiders. Apparently, that's what a lot of people start with, is just like gigantic, like 2 feet wide spiders hanging off of the ceiling or crawling up the wall.
I've heard
Like,
that before. Mhm.
so it's like shadow beans, these
Mm.
little tiny Christmas lights that would come in, and I thought that they were talking to me. I don't remember what they were saying, but in my memories of seeing these things, my mom had a sewing machine and sewing table. I had a huge room when I was a kid, and my mom's sewing table and like sewing machine was at the end there. So she would sew sometimes when I would go to sleep with a little light on, and then she would turn it off, and I would wake up sometimes and I would just be hysterical saying like, can you keep sewing till I fall asleep? Because I didn't want her to turn off the light. So I had a bathroom also, like a ensuite bathroom in my bedroom. And so it was around that time when I was 5 or 6 years old that I was terrified of the dark, and I slept with that night light on until I was 40 years old. I
Uh-huh.
had it used to be, it turned into a Himalayan salt lamp kind of thing when I was older. But when I was a kid, and even when I was like an adult and moved into different houses and stuff, I slept with the night light on until I was 40. So I was terrified of something. I don't know what. I know I had the hypnagogic experiences, and I know those lights were coming in, and I know I was communicating with them. I don't remember being afraid of those lights, but I was afraid of something. I was terrified, even as like 39 years old. I was terrified of the dark. So
Mm.
I don't know what, and again, I don't know why I'm laughing, but it's because it sounds ridiculous. But again, I would have just think like I was scared of ghosts. My grandparents' house was haunted. I was terrified of seeing one of the ghosts in my grandparents' house. If
Yeah.
I was left alone there, I would not stay in the house. And I have
That's
lots
not
of,
uncommon, though. I mean, who says, "Oh, I love ghosts." Come on.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I understand. Yeah, but look, here's why I'm asking the question, Desta, because we're trying to understand. Let's assume the gate was done that that gate was created in part or maybe exclusively for what you're intimating, what you're kind of looking into, and that is to understand the psi capacity of certain individuals to be able to exploit it in some way, shape, or form, and how that may also connect with the contact encounter phenomenon. If the question becomes, how are the children like yourself chosen? Obviously, you were very bright and you were identified as such to go into that program, but there had to be other features in conjunction with your being book smart that brought you into that program, not the least of which is your propensity to have encounters. And that's the reason why I asked the question, do you recall having some sort of phenomena happening to you prior to going into the GATE program? And it sounds like the answer is yes. And so could we infer, or could we assume that they were able to pluck out individuals that had this psychic aptitude, to begin with, and
Yeah.
and I'm sorry, and what do I want to say, and kind of guide it or exploit it?
We are living at a time of great challenge and incredible opportunity. A time when taking life into our own hands, charting our own course, and finding our own answers is more accessible than ever before. During this time, you may be asking yourself, what am I called to do? What if I could discover not only my own inner healing power, but help others all over this planet discover theirs? We all have the ability to heal ourselves, but it takes a special approach, a unique approach. Quantum healing hypnosis technique, also known as QHHT, a method developed by pioneering hypnotherapist and past life regression expert Dolores Cannon, is the approach that thousands have used and taught to access the deeper aspect of the self for healing at the core level. We all have the ability to tap into the higher self, the oversoul, the higher consciousness, and we have the means to help others to do the same. QHHT is designed to help the individual access the subconscious, the storehouse of all information, through visualization at the deepest level imaginable, a process that Dolores Cannon discovered and refined during her decades of working with individuals from around the globe. Training with QHHT will provide the guidance and give you the tools to help others tap that incredible force within. Now, you can access this exclusive training online, bringing the tools needed right to you, so you can assist others in finding their own answers and achieve total healing. This is powerful and needed now more than ever. Be a part of the pioneering work and legacy of Dolores Cannon by learning QHHT. Start today by clicking on the link in the description of this show to get started. And when you do, don't forget to mention Higher Journeys to get a 10% course discount when you sign up. It's time we all take back control of our lives and chart the course for success at every level. It's time to discover the power of quantum healing hypnosis technique by helping others to help themselves. And by doing this, we are helping to heal the world.
Yeah, and again with our the GATE survey, I have a lot of people that responded. One of my questions is, because I'm very interested in this as well, is did they have any contact? Excuse me, did they have any contact with any beings before they were chosen for the GATE program? So a lot of people, I think it's about 60 or 70%. A lot of people that were in the GATE program had experiences before they were chosen for the program. So even though we know that it was like a personality test, an IQ test, it was trying to pick creative people. It was looking for leaders, like leadership, people with strong leadership abilities. There was a bunch of things that they claim they were looking for. So what does that mean then? So I would say that what they could have done, because my school in particular, that I found out from my FIPA request, my school had what was called a GATE council. So that meant that what it was the principal, the homeroom school teacher, and the guidance counselor would all have a say in who was chosen for the program. So it wasn't just whatever the test was. It was, they had the ability to say this person didn't get a high score on the test, but because of whatever, we're going to include them in the GATE program. Mm-hmm. So my thought on that, and again, I don't know, but because so many other people had experiences before they went into the GATE program, I can only, again, guess that maybe what they were doing in school is just saying, does anyone here have an imaginary friend? Does anyone see
Okay.
these? Like maybe the teachers just randomly said it, in like not in a way where everyone would go home and tell their parents. Maybe it was just once in a while they would just covertly say it in a sentence. Does anyone here have something that they talk to? Like I don't remember having an actual like imaginary friend, but maybe they did say something like, does anyone see lights in their rooms? Does anyone have this? Is anyone scared of the dark? I can't imagine what they would be asking, but they could have been asking just, very questions that wouldn't have raised any red flags with any people. Does anyone have, has anyone's grandmother passed away and then you had a dream about her after? I don't know, but they could have just asked that and then picked those people that they thought might also be, a good candidate for the program because of what they knew that they were about to eventually do. I can't really imagine thousands and tens of thousands of schools and all these teachers knew about all this stuff. So it's like, but I don't know. Like, I don't know what else the explanation could be.
That was a question I was going to ask you as I'm thinking about, I mean, this obviously, let's again assume that GATE was something more than what it was presented as. That means there was a lot of coordination and a lot of covert operation going on. And some of the people that were, part of the program that were teaching or running the program, the teachers had to know something. My God. I mean, we're talking about some strange stuff that went on in these. Let me ask you this, and I apologize because there's so many things I want to get in here, but do you recall any actual normal learning exercises that you were doing? I mean, so far, everything that you've mentioned that GATE was anything but normal learning, like history or math or, science, anything.
The only things I remember, like when we were in the library for some of those times, I remember they wanted to know what books we were interested in. So I remember being interested in space and animals. I remember that was like the only things I cared about when I was a kid, really, is like animals and space. So they would like say, go to the library and bring out, 4 of your favorite books. And I knew I still to this day, like remember where those 2 sections, all the animal stuff and all the space stuff. So, and again, that's kind of weird. So the animal stuff, because one of my theories in the book is that INFJ, like really intuitive, introverted feeling people, like an INFJ for the Myers-Briggs, personality test.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, because I'm an INFJ, I can only like guess. And some people might say neurodivergent or very sensitive people that were hyper focused, had really intuitive abilities. So whatever that means, and were sensitive. So, and pattern recognition. So could they tell that from someone who was in grade 2? Like, I don't know, but that seems to be the group of people that they were choosing. So did those people, because they were so hypersensitive and so empathic, so because I was choosing animal books, like, was that a hit for them? Like, that they thought she must be empathic, she loves animals, or the space thing, she loves space. So does that make sense that she might, especially in those days, like aliens? Not like now we associate space with aliens so much, but because I was interested in like out of this world kind of things, or because it was science and they wanted, the STEM program was a big thing, the science, engineering, math, science, technology, engineering, and math. Like that was one of the things that they were supposed to be looking for, to get the best and the brightest kids, so they could win the Cold War, to make sure that they had smart kids that were going to grow up and be able to go into these programs and, invent stuff and make sure that we won the space race. You as Americans won the space race, kind of thing, right? So did my space interest have anything to do with science and technology? I don't know really, but again, those are the dots I'm connecting back from looking at it, that I remember that they were getting us to do stuff like that. I also remember, like I said, that the ink blots and some of the things was a book, like I said last time, like we had to write a book. And I'm remembering, and
you had to write a book? You had to write a book?
The crazy thing is I just found it. So I moved to this house only a couple of years ago from Winnipeg. So I have all of my stuff from my whole life, in toy boxes and stuff. And we just renovated and our basement just flooded. So we had to take all this stuff out of the basement. So I just happened to go through my stuff like last year. And I was thinking about trying to see if I had any records of my report cards that said anything about being in the GATE program. And so I went through all of my elementary school stuff and I found every report card for every grade, and none of them ever mentioned anything to do with this green group. My group was called the green group. I couldn't find anything, but what I did find is this book. So we had to write a book. And I remember, and again, this would never connect any dots for me, just thinking about it, but we wrote a book.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we wrote a book, and I remember that she said, like, you have to come up with your own story. And I remember thinking that I didn't know how to, and I was a horrible drawer, and I thought that I wasn't very creative as a kid. So I remember when she said, come up with your own, thought for a book, and you have to write, it has to be however many pages or whatever. And I thought, I had no idea what I could do. But this just makes sense only recently to me, that I used to watch Twilight Zone, I guess, because I remember what I did is I basically took a Twilight Zone episode that I watched and I just wrote it down. So I cheated basically, and I didn't come up with my own story. I made the story be this Twilight, thinking that, but the teacher would never know. So I did this Twilight Zone episode, which was called The Ballerina. And she says, you have to draw your own pictures. And I didn't know how to draw, but I wanted to get a good mark. So I feel like I kind of cheated and, stole an episode of the Twilight Zone for this book. And when we had to draw the pictures, I went to the library and I traced pictures that I thought would be good in the book and again, I never would have thought of this, but what I found with my FIPA request was that they were categorizing, they had 4 categories that they were putting GATE kids in. It was the creative types, the leaders, the intellectuals, and the Al Capone type. And so
talk about what the Al Capone type is. Let's break that down a little bit.
Well, so they didn't in my FIPA request break it down that much, but what I just figured out, while I was researching this book and researching that is, of course, Al Capone is an American gangster, right? He was basically a charismatic leader, a highly intellectual, person that I guess you could say was skirting around the laws so he could benefit and try and not get caught. Mm-hmm. So there's a big part of my book where I go through the compliant kids versus the non-compliant.
Non-conforming, exactly.
Non-conforming, yes. Versus the conforming. So I think, so they never said that I was the Al Capone type, but that was one of the 4 types. And I am a very non-compliant person. I have been my whole life. And so what I think is that's what that book, I just thought of this, a couple months ago. I think me writing that book, because I cheated, like you could kind of say I cheated because I didn't know how to make up a really good story, but I wanted to get the best mark in the class. And I didn't know how to draw, but I didn't know how to cheat. I hate to say cheat because I was like in grade 2, but and I don't usually cheat on things, but you know what I mean? It's that Al Capone type, I think, where I wanted to get a good mark. I wanted to be the best. And I tried to figure out how to go around the rules because I didn't think I was going to pass or I was going to get a good grade doing it myself. Because I never thought I was very creative, but I was creative in that way where I could.
Absolutely. That counts.
Yeah. And I think that they were maybe looking for these non-compliant types. And maybe that book, I don't know if she would have figured it out. I don't know if I told her, I don't know if that was, if they came to any conclusions by the way that I wrote that book. But I just realized that a couple months ago is I think that might be a perfect example of what the Al Capone type is, right? It's like breaking the rules and not getting caught, basically not listening to what you're supposed to do because you still want to advance, you still want to be the best, you still want, to be better than everyone else, but you can't do it with your natural abilities, like let's just say. So I don't know what the two people in my other class, I don't remember what they ended up doing, but I just found this book very recently. We had to have a hardcover on the front and back, and we put like a hole punch, and then we had a string that we tied with it, we bound it in. And so, I don't know. So that's maybe a good example of, anyways, the Al Capone type, and also maybe a good example of kind of what they were looking for. Because I think the plasticity in your mind to not just do what someone's telling you to do. If someone says do something and you do it, that to me like feels like a good follower, a good sheep.
That's exactly. And they were looking for the outliers as well as didn't you talk about just the even sort of the subgroups that existed within this GATE program, that there were all of these outlying abilities that would include psi ability, and other sorts of things, but within that subgroup, there were those that lean more toward being conformist and non-conformist. They were looking to identify almost where to place these individuals, possibly in society as they became adults, always to their advantage, but in different roles. Does that make sense? Like, was there indeed a subgroup where you were all in GATE or GATE type programs, but there were the conformists and the non-conformists within the GATE program? And the conformists would be the ones that you talked about would be our future leaders, because they would be the ones that could direct all of us other conformers to do what they say, type of thing.
Well, that is, and that was definitely a theory that I was looking into, and I just happened to be watching something with Dr. Juliet Engel. So she is someone who claims to be a Project Monarch survivor. And she said, so I knew that she claimed to be in one of these programs. She was in it in the 50s, and they didn't really start until the 60s. But I have a lot of people that came forward, even Whitley, that came forward and said that they were in something like this in the late 50s. So Juliet Engel is one of these people. And she actually said that what she thinks is that they were looking for the conformists because they were going to be the ones that were helped. So I have a part of my book that says, like, were you helped or hindered? Like, was your career path basically helped, in strange ways that none of your friends were helped in your career path? Like, all of a sudden someone would just send you an email. Like, one of the guys in my class was given a green card and was living in the States. And I don't know if you know how hard that is, but I've been trying to get into the States for my entire life. Like, it's almost impossible for Canadians. And you have to prove that you're better than any American. You're going to take a job from another American. And so they don't want people in there unless you could really prove that I can do something that no other American can. So I do have a handful of friends that did get these green cards, but they're literally like Emmy award people doing, stuff in Hollywood, or doctors, or this one person who was in tech. He was in technology, and he was in my class. And so it's brilliant people that would almost never be able to go somewhere else, right? So if they were choosing people like that, then you have to be really special. And a lot of these people say that they were guided. So they were just like randomly, someone would say like, oh, did you, I heard that you were doing this, or here's a scholarship, here's some extra money. Did you ever meet this person? Let me introduce you to this. And it was just slow. And a lot of people that have filled out our GATE survey say the same thing, that they were either guided, they feel like they were guided more than all their friends, and helped. And I always say, were you the compliant or the non-compliant? Most people that did our survey said they were non-compliant. And they do feel like their career path was derailed or blocked as an adult. And some of the people that were compliant said that they do feel that they were chosen. And a lot of them are military, and some of them are military intelligence, and they feel like they were chosen and helped for their career, for that career path.
You just brought up something that I wanted to bring up. Or you just mentioned something that I'd like to bring up having to do with military. Desta, based on your research, if you were able to peek under this lid, if you will, were you able to get any profile of the parents of these children that were in these programs? And if so, was there a military connection that may have stood out with the parents?
I'm going to write that down because I'm doing a second part of the survey and I didn't ask about that, but I will say that probably, if I'm just like really guessing here, that maybe 15 to 20% of the people who filled out the survey just said that my parents were in the military.
Okay.
So I'm going to add that to the second one. So I didn't, but I know that we were going to talk about Jake Barber and what
Yes, let's go there.
really shocked me when I heard that interview with Jake Barber, who's the UFO whistleblower, who was a crash retrieval or like I don't know what he was called. He was a pilot, I think.
He was a helicopter pilot on covert crash retrievals in the desert.
Right. And one of the UAP that he picked up was an egg-shaped craft, and when he picked it up, he had like an overwhelming sense of love and compassion, and he was very emotional, moved to tears, I think he said, and he had a connection to this thing that was probably either inside the craft or connected to the craft, a very emotional, overwhelming experience for him. And he was getting some kind of telepathic messages that he felt it was a female being, and it was just sending him, I can't really remember the story, but like love and compassion kind of like things that were very strange for him. And he was very surprised at that connection. But when I heard his interview, so he was on News Nation with Ross Coulthart, and his experience, when I heard it, I couldn't believe it. And this is one of the things that actually made me start thinking that I had to write a book, or I had to at least start putting all of this research into a manuscript and just see where it went, was when I heard that interview with Jake, and Ross said, were you part of any kind, that some of these people, and I never heard anyone say this, so I was so surprised that Ross was saying it like he knew about it, but he said, that there's some programs that children are involved in school. Were you part of this program? And he says, yeah, I was in the GATE program, and both of his grandfathers, I think he said, were military, and one of them, I think he called it the Navy grandpa, was also the ambassador of the GATE program in his area. So yes, for his parents having both military backgrounds and from one of those people having a GATE connection, that's very, it's very strange. And it really, and then I think Ross also said, do you think this is why you were chosen for this program? And he said, yes. Do you think this is the reason why you had
the crash retrieval program, you mean?
Yep. And
Okay.
do you think this had to do with why you had like this connection to the being that was part of that craft? And he said, yes. I extrapolated that a little bit, and I don't know if he's an INFJ, but I kind of went into some of the other things that he was saying in that interview, and the sensitivity, the empathic, I kind of got the feeling, because he was saying things like that he was let me think. It was like the dead serious goofball, he didn't say compassionate warrior. Now I forget exactly what it was.
You're talking about the oxymoronic sort of elements that come out in identifying these individuals. Yeah.
That were part of special ops, that were part of the program that he was on for crash retrievals. And because he's the Skywatcher program, what I was kind of, trying to theorize from that is that it seems like other people that were part of the Skywatchers that are psionic assets now, like one of the guys called Jordan Jozak. He's another person who was one of the psionic assets in Skywatcher. He also said he was part of the GATE program, and that he had some horrific things happen to him as well when he was part of this program. They took him out of his school and put him in a different actual school, he said. And so, and he, of course, is someone who's communicating with the ETs, or the craft, at least, through this program. So, yeah, so between the synchronicity of him being even in the UFO program in general, because a lot of this has nothing to do with UFOs, but I'm from the UFO community. So when I found another UFO person that was also, doing stuff that had to do with psychic abilities and craft and beings, because I have been channeling for, over 10 years. And so, and he was a GATE program. Yeah. And like you're saying, with his parents being in the military as well, I was like, that's a huge big ball of, connections that I could actually,
Connections.
put in the book for sure.
Absolutely. Reminded. I mean, look, again, we're kind of, it seems, skirting around the obvious, Desta, and I think we need to, because you want to be cautious and we want to be somewhat pragmatic about what we're looking at here, because a lot of this is just unbelievable when your mind takes you to a place of, oh my God, if this was really happening for this, and so it still boggles the mind that individuals would be a part of something that's clearly nefarious and clearly self-serving, not for the good of humanity, but for the using humans as resources for their own agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my train of thought in saying all of that. I don't know what my point was. Um,
With Jake.
let's keep talking about Jake Barber for a minute, because you said something in your book that I found interesting in terms of not only his connection with Gate, but his side, or perhaps Gate being the gateway that developed or enhanced his psychic ability. The connection that he had with this egg-shaped object and that emotional bond that was there. You bring up in your book this idea of individuals who have high psychokinetic ability, and that those are the ones that may be doing the flying of the craft or entering the craft. Talk about that. You know what I'm talking about. In other words, could it take something other than just our, well, obviously, I think when you're interacting with non-human intelligence, there's another aspect of us that's being turned on to be able to maintain that contact anyway. But when we really get into a full interaction, including but not limited to, and I've talked to countless individuals who have talked about being brought on board craft and being taught how to operate that craft. And what is said repeatedly is it's not a mechanical process, it's consciousness itself. I'm trying to connect a bunch of dots here. Let's assume that Gate was a training ground to enhance that ability to be able to enrich the interaction with non-human intelligence. Is that what you were alluding to in the book?
Yeah, so another weird synchronicity, and that's why I put it in the book, is that Grant Canner and I wrote a book called UFO Sky Pilots, and it was all the people that he's ever interviewed that have flown the craft, right? So and the crazy thing again is that I'm in the book because I have done that before. And so again, it's just such a weird, so we wrote that book, I'm not sure when, maybe 2019 or something like that, maybe 2018. But I have had an experience like that. And again, my experience wasn't, most people and possibly every person that Grant or that we interviewed for that book was taught to fly the craft mostly through an abduction experience. Mine wasn't that. Mine was that I had like a meditation, and it's kind of a long story, but I had a meditation where I was trying to get out of my body. I was trying to be able to do astral traveling. I was trying to be able to do the rolling out of your body in the middle of the night. So I was trying to do like out of body experiences or astral traveling. And I was trying to be able to talk to my higher self. And while I was taking these two classes, I was, presented with a being that kind of like stood behind me here and had his hand on my shoulder. And I was like trying to say, like, I think this is all has to do with theta, the theta brainwave state. And I think UFO experiences, I think psychedelic experiences, near-death experiences, all this stuff, I think has to do with theta. So I was like, basically, this is right when I met Grant, and I was like in 2014 maybe, and I was obsessed with this theta state. I thought everything came from the theta state. And right when I met Grant, I think I told him like my whole theory. But what happened is this being came to me and said, do you want to go to theta? I'll show you how to go to theta, because I couldn't do it. I was trying every night to roll out of my body. I was doing all the experiments. I had my body paralyzed every night. I was just sitting there, paralyzed, looking around the room, seeing crazy things and hearing crazy things, but I couldn't roll out of my body. So I was basically like screaming to the universe, like, someone help me. Why can't I figure this out? Why can't I roll out of my body? I want to, experience this theta state. And this being came and said, you want to know what theta is like? I'll show you what theta is like. And this being kind of like, went into my brain basically and showed me what theta felt like in your brain. So it basically took my brain and turned it down to the theta state so I could experience what it was like. And I'm sure, like, it didn't say this, but I'm sure it did that. So I knew what it felt like for me to be able to go there, because after that experience, the next day and the next, and forever since then, I know what it feels like, and I could get there almost immediately. So that being showed me how to get to theta. And then it basically said, like, getting into theta is exactly the same as this. And then I was immediately on a craft and had like the window and like, space behind it or whatever. And it was still sitting, was still standing here with his like arm on my shoulder. And I was on this craft and I was flying the craft. I wasn't doing it. It was showing me in my brain what it felt like to have this connection with the actual craft. So as it was moving, I was like, oh, that's how you do it. Just like when I went to theta, I was like, oh, that's what it feels like. And then it said, and this is the same, like being in theta is the same as as being in the craft, connecting with the craft, which is the same as this. And this was for me to pick a place in the solar system or in the whatever I was looking at, the zillion stars, pick a place. And when I picked that place, in one split second, we were there. So what it was doing was showing me in my brain how the connection to lowering so now I'm going to say it's dissociation, right? But I wasn't saying this a year ago, but so I just thought it was bringing me to the state of what theta is. And I just see that as going down with your brainwave states. And maybe that's why it showed me that. But what it was basically doing is saying, when you're in theta, it's the same as having this conscious connection with the craft, because you are one with the craft. When you've completely shut your ego down, completely shut your left brain down, and you're just, like in this state, you can fly the craft, you can connect with the craft, you are the craft, you're part of basically the universe. You're part of everything. You can remote view, you can see, targets, you can channel, communicate with the beings, you can, all these things, dowsing, scrying, everything that that you can do, all has to do with being from this one state. And that being taught me how to do that. And so this communication with the craft and this connection with the craft, so my story is in this book as well. But what Grant always says is, to finish kind of your question, what Grant always says is he takes two main people. He takes Wilbert Smith, but he also takes Dr. Eric Walker, who was the president of Penn State University, and Ben Rich, who was the president of Lockheed Skunk Works. And he always uses these two quotes from both of them. And basically both of them are the same, which is where they were confronted with someone asking questions about the UFO, they used to say problem, the UFO problem. And both of them, their response was, what do you know about ESP? And then the person who was, being interviewed or whatever said, you mean that all of time and space is connected? And Ben Rich at that one, Ben Rich said, yes, unless you know about ESP, you won't be brought into the program. And so that's what basically these people from these big programs, I think, have always been saying, is that ESP is the connection and is the tie-in, is the thread that connects all of this stuff together. You can say, what is the aliens or the craft or whatever, but the thread and the most important part of this whole entire thing is not that it's aliens, it's not anything, it's the ESP connection.
It's consciousness itself. In fact, this is a perfect time for me to read this quote that you, it's a question that you're asking where you say, what if the real, and I'm going to bring it back to MK Ultra because again, this is a big ball of wax here and this is part of it. You say, what if the real goal of MK Ultra wasn't just to create spies, saboteurs, or assassins, but to hijack consciousness itself? In like manner, you could say, what if the real goal of all of that you're talking about right now, in understanding how to operate, fill in the blank, is consciousness itself? At the core of it all is consciousness. And even though this word was taboo and people would get kicked out of science conferences for bringing up the word not too long ago, it is at the heart of what all of these operatives, all of these intel agencies, all of them have been trying to understand. It is the link that brings everything together.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to include that part of, so even though it seems like it's a totally separate piece and all these things are separate pieces, and we don't know if it's psionic abilities that they were looking for or craft specifically or flying the craft, but that part of the book, again, because I had this specific personal experience with being able to fly the craft as well. And what Whitley brought up that I even thinking about is that being is what I said to you in our first part of this, is that is the being that I've seen numerous times in my life. That's the being.
Before
Yes.
you got into the GATE program?
I don't know about that, no, but throughout my life, I've seen it a handful of times. And what Whitley was trying to like postulate is that I wonder if it was the beings that, chose, all, not just me, but like any experiencer, and that the beings were trying to make this conscious connection in our heads, and the government was kind of trying to like, reverse engineer or something and trying to emulate these experiences or experiments to put children through to see if they could like crack the I don't really know how to explain it, but like crack the code that it might be, which is consciousness, and be able to get these children into the mindset. And I think it's a dissociative mindset where we could talk to the beings. And talking to the beings is the same as flying the craft, bringing the craft down like these psionic assets do now, or like we're talking about finding missing people. All of the things is the primary source of it all is consciousness, and it is this ESP link through the whole entire thing. And I think that's really the big picture of what the book is about. Basically, the big picture is that, like without them hijacking consciousness and trying to figure out how they could, do something with it on their side, like on the military side of it, and whether talking to the beings is part of it, and why that would be part of it, bringing down the craft, having messages from them. I don't know. Like that's like a whole other, rabbit hole to go down of like what they think it is and why they think that it's important to have people that are having these abilities and what they can do with those abilities.
Desta, do you think, here's a question. Are these programs happening in conjunction with some of these alien species or in spite of them?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the really hard part. I don't know. And that's why one of my big questions for the survey was, were you having experiences before you were chosen for the GATE program? Because it really makes me think, were we broken or were we chosen? Like that's part of the book, is like, were they just looking for a way in, trying to make this divide in kids, whether it's through trauma or through, the gateway process, like just trying to alter states of consciousness to be able to get you to dissociate? Were they doing that to us because they wanted to get some of these people that had better abilities than other people, or had more of a connection, or could maybe bring back information, or be able to talk to the beings, however, aliens, or spirit, or however you want to say it? Or were they finding people that had these natural abilities already and trying to trying to
enhance them or direct them to really kind of hijack the not to cut you off, but what I'm kind of seeing a picture of is identifying individuals that have a propensity for these experiences, but doing it at a time where the brain hasn't fully formed yet, so they can kind of insert themselves in it and direct it in the direction they want it to go, or how it's to be used. That's what I think. And this goes back to the key question that I asked you, Desta, is Do you recall having experiences, with non-human intelligence prior to being in this program? Your answer was yes. I have a feeling that this is the case with a lot of individuals, which tells me, just to cut to the chase, that these individuals found a way to tag individuals like yourself, maybe primarily because of that. And coupled with all these other things that go with it, and then they could kind of insert themselves or insert and guide or direct how these propensities were to be developed. That's kind of what I see going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll add something to it, which I'm not sure how I feel about this, but here's another, again, something that I never thought about. But when I heard it, I decided to add it to the book because I hadn't thought about it like this way. So there's another person I reference in the book named Jason Georgiani. So he did, gosh, I can't remember. It's in the book. If it was a Danny Jones interview, or I can't remember, Jesse Michaels interview, but his theory was that maybe this whole thing is like a long-term psyop from the government that put this when we were split. So when this, whether trauma or whatever split us, right? So when this dissociative like time occurred in the program. So when we were split, did they push in an alien agenda component where then we were kind of like front loaded and always told, now you're going to go see the bean. Here's the bean. And maybe were we followed after that from the government, and it's like its own psychological operation where they're controlling the narrative because they were the ones that put this idea in our heads in the very first place when we were children in these programs. And so, and he was using Whitley Strieber as one of the examples of this, is because Whitley saw a friend of his when he was confronted with some of the beans at one point, and he was, confused at why would his friend, someone that he recognized and a human, be with all these beans. And what Georgiani was, postulating, I guess, was that maybe the beans weren't the beans, and this whole thing was, and maybe the implant that, it doesn't have to be just Whitley, but, people have, was a government controlled, experiment where they were putting this stuff into, people to then have them be experiencers for their whole life, being able to track them government, implemented implants. And then the story was always told, because that's the mind control part of it. If they were telling us we were seeing beings, and then, having this like screen memory kind of thing where it was just, we were having this experience, and then the experience always leads to you being able to see a being. It's always this being that you're seeing throughout your whole entire life, because that's what they kind of like, put into your psyche when you were a small child. And that's just, you can't get away with it. And then they can control the narrative. Then it's literally a psychological operation where they could have these experiencers go out to the whole world, but they're the ones that implemented this, narrative in the first place with these kids. I don't think that's as like, because I've been in, involved in all this stuff for so long, I don't think that's it. But that's because I'm interested in psychological operations, that like that psyop. And because they were, how we were talking about before, like, making us the laughing stock of, everybody by saying that we were experiencers, but having that as part of a little slow drip of disclosure, like, well, look at these people, they saw the aliens, look at these people, everyone else, make fun of them at the other side of the thing, that the misinformation, trying to make us look crazy, but still having us out there talking about these experiences because they're so real to us, because things are happening. So is that possible? It's a very interesting perspective that I wouldn't have thought about if I wouldn't have heard someone talk about it. So I put it in the book because, who knows what it is? Who knows what they're doing, and who knows what any of this is?
Somebody does. Well, that's the point. Somebody does. Damn it. Somebody does. And it's dizzying, you guys, is it not? Do we need to know all of the how it's happening, but for the fact that it is happening, Desta? Let me ask you this. Let's go back to some numbers with Gate. How were you able to get a handle on the percentage of the school age population that are in these GATE programs writ large? I mean, I'm talking not just the States, but Canada, and you said you're dipping into New Zealand and Australia as well. What are we talking about in terms of numbers?
Actually, I have not heard anyone talk about that, and I haven't looked into it. I'm not sure. I know for my class, I know there was quite a few classes that around my age group, like when I was younger, and I know everyone, so all my friends, brothers and sisters, basically, we're all in every class that we had in our school. And there was a handful of classes that didn't have the GATE program. And in my class, there was only 3 of us in it. So I've never seen anything with the numbers of how many kids they were taking. From the people that I've talked to, some of these classes were as big as 12 or 14 kids. And a lot of people say it was just them. It was just them taken out of the school for half days, full days, taken to other locations. But generally, the classes seem to be about five people. So I don't know what the number is. Actually, I never even thought of that. It's a good question.
Because I think if we were to get a handle on how not how common the program is, but what percentage of individuals are, for whatever reason, being recruited into these programs, will give us a sense of, some of all these other things that trail off of these experiences.
I went, like, when I really started researching this, I went through my book, like through my phone book, and basically texted or emailed at least 100 people of just like friends or people that I talk to, all the time, just to ask if anyone else was in it. And no one that I know was
Nobody.
in it.
Oh, that's
not one person. There was a handful of people whose kids were either asked to be in it and they said no because they had heard of weird things happening in the program, or some people where the kid was in it their children was in it for a little while and then asked to be taken out of it or whatever. But no one that I know, and I reached out to at least 100, 125 people, not one person was in it.
How were you referring to it to them? Just enrichment program? Because that's what it's called very broadly, right? Enrichment programs.
Well, it's called TAG, SEAM, enrichment, gifted and talented. Someone just told me a new one yesterday that I hadn't heard of before.
Isn't there something called was it called Upward Bound or ABC?
Yeah,
I'm familiar with some.
ABC is part of it.
Which we had in Massachusetts. I was part of something called METCO, which, and I'm embarrassed because I can't remember what the acronym METCO, it's an acronym, what it stands for. Essentially, that would bus individuals of color into the suburbs to have into more suburban, more affluent areas to get better education, public education. And and my mother was an educator, by the way, and she was a part of several of these special programs, not GATE, but she was very involved with the magnet, what was referred to as the magnet program in Boston Public Schools. And, when you learn about things like GATE, it makes you think of all these other sort of special initiatives that were kind of tagged onto public education back in that time frame of like the 60s and 70s and even 80s. So I'm just really curious as to how ubiquitous this was, particularly if perhaps the exclusive reason for putting it together was for what we're alluding to here, not just partly, but exclusively. And that's a big one. Are you, as far as you know, are you the only one that's really tried to possibly make this connection with MK Ultra and GATE?
Well, the funny thing is, like January, February, March kind of is when I was looking into it at 2025. When I started writing the book, I basically stopped looking at anything on YouTube because I was really focused in research and I didn't want to get, sidetracked into, theories. I was trying to keep it as my experiences, what I had heard up to that point, and then the real documented programs that they were doing. And right when I released the book in, say, October, I think I released it, I went back and I started looking, and I cannot believe there is tons of videos on it. There is tons of people talking about it.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, if you just look up GATE program now, there's people that are getting 500,000 views on their podcast talking about the GATE program. So like I said,
I'm sorry, as it relates to MK Ultra though, what's the hook on?
Oh, okay. People
They're not just talking about the GATE program as an educational program that's Cool. You're
No, no,
talking
no.
about,
No
okay.
one, I've never actually seen anyone who's not talking about it linked to other things. So
Mhm.
whether, but now that I've been looking back at it since I released the book, people are actually putting some theories that I never thought of, and I thought about updating the book and putting in new. I don't know if I'll do that or not, but I haven't really looked into it that much. But definitely, tons of people are talking about it now, and the MK Ultra link is a big part of it now for sure. Yeah.
MK Ultra is declassified. It supposedly ended in 1973. But my question, and I know you've asked this as well, and you may go into this in your book, do you believe that there's a current iteration of something like that going on right now?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's no way that they don't know about stuff like this. The psychic connection to everything, the like everything we've talked about so far, the Al Capone types, the neurodivergent types, the like these groups of people that can, pattern recognize, like this pattern recognition, I think is a big thing too, the creative aspect of it. But I think it's like really sensitive kids that are kind of outside the box. So whether you're saying like the normies, I guess, like maybe they're only choosing the outliers, whether it's like really non compliant kids, the kids that got in a lot of trouble, maybe some of the neurodivergent kids because they couldn't concentrate or because they were really bored in school. Maybe it was high IQ, but maybe it was a whole bunch of other things. But whatever, like one of the quotes in the book that one of the people from my school actually made was something like, there's more differences between the kids in the GATE program than there is between the GATE kids and the other kids. So I don't know
Oh,
exactly.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so that like that's so vague, but it could mean so many different things. I'm not really sure what they mean, but it definitely means that they're the outliers and they're all very different from each other. So I was trying to put out, because of the Jake Barber thing especially, and because of my background in channeling and UFOs and all my crazy experiences. So I was trying to put that together, and I really think that's a big part of it, the hijacking consciousness itself. And because of Grant, always doing all these things where, all these, people that are, in the government or Penn State University presidents, all these people that Grant always follows because they're thinking it's an ESP connection, because clearly some of us have psychic abilities that were in the program, because I'm from the UFO community. Like I was trying to tie it around my experiences all together, but very clearly, whatever they were choosing the kids for, we all have a very similar, based on my survey results, we all have very similar but paranormal and UFO experiences throughout our whole lives.
Yeah.
So whatever
Yeah.
that means, I don't even know. It's like so hard to figure out how many more aspects to the puzzle there is. But yeah, people online are speculating all sorts of things now. But
Wow.
yeah.
Well, listen, they all need to know about your book, Desta. This is great work. By the way, she is a brilliant writer. She has a little bit of practice with it, working with Grant Cameron for so long. And you've written a couple of different books, right? This isn't your first solo project, right?
No, I have a couple. My first two books, Grant coerced me into putting out, but they were just all my channeled stuff. So they're just channeled messages, like weird things I was getting when I just 2015 or whatever, when I just started channeling, and then just because I broke my leg about a year and a couple months ago, that's what
Oh,
started this whole thing. Is I was like, I needed ankle reconstructive surgery, so I was in bed for 6 months.
oh my
Like
God.
I couldn't
Wow.
do anything except for go to the bathroom. So where a lot of these books came from is just sitting there doing nothing but having downloads of like all this information and finding things online, researching things, and then just having 12 hours a day I was sitting there. So I was just pouring out information, pouring out manuscripts, pouring out writing. So
Absolutely.
so maybe it was a blessing. I was saying that
I
about
think it's a
my
blessing. I think it's a blessing. It's beautifully written, you guys. Listen, we'll make sure to have a link to MK Ultra for Children. What a title. The Hunt for Psychic Abilities Through the GATE program. And we will also make sure, by the way, can you give us a link directly to the questionnaire? I know that I want to take that questionnaire myself, actually.
Sure,
So that will
absolutely.
take us right in. So if you could send that over to me, I'll make sure to have it in the description. That would be great. Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to close out this part two with?
No, thank you. We were like, really, that was a long time to go through. I think we touched on almost everything, that I was trying to get to in the book. And you're a great
Mm.
interviewer. I mean, you like really got all the different aspects of it. So I mean,
Well,
I
you made it
appreciate you.
easy.
Thank you for having me.
You made it so easy, my dear, and it's so good to be back with you again. I hope we get to see each other again too.
Yeah,
Soon.
absolutely.
It's very soon.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Desta Barnabe, thank you, my dear. Keep up the good fight. You're doing some amazing, amazing work. And please say hello to Mr. Grant Cameron for me, would you?
I will for sure. Thank you so much.
All right. Don't hang up. We'll say a proper goodbye. But I'm going to sign off with the Journeyers for now. I hope you enjoyed this part 2. And if you haven't seen part 1, you know where to find it. We'll, of course, have a link for that as well. But in the meantime, we'll see you next time right here on Higher Journeys. Take care.